All right, me. It is October 29th. I'm sitting in good old Tim's room. Shout out to Tim and my ninth grade English class. But during prep, and now I'm recording this during the lunch period, I finished reading Mike Lupica's The Big Field. It was very nice to go back to quite an easy read. Just power through it, and just kind of like oh yeah, feel good after reading some heavier stuff the last couple times. But yeah. Out of the Mike Lupica books that I've read so far for all of this, I would say probably my least favorite. Thank you, bells. But I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that, like, as we kind of see at the end with Hutch, is that, like, all of these problems aren't actual big problems, right? It's a lot of just, like, being the second, right? Which in itself is a whole other issue, right? I do have to say that this book does, I think, cover something that was, like, I think was starting to become a legitimate issue within not just like youth sports, but just youth in general. Starting, kind of some point in the 90s, and then has really become prevalent to the point of where it is basically completely dominated not only youth sports, but kind of youth culture in general. But specifically with, I guess, the overall idea, right, is the thinking or the belief of loving something not because you love it, but loving something because of what it can do for you, right? And we see kind of this difference between Daryl and Hutch. Keith is his real name, but everyone calls him Hutch, where they're both incredibly talented 14-year-olds that are playing on U17 and are the stars of their U17 team, which, if you know, or at least have an understanding of how kind of baseball works at the youth level, right, that's insane, first of all, that not only do you have one star 14-year-old playing on U17, but you have two of them that are, these almost seemingly generational athletes. But that's that. In which you have Hutch, who is the main character, that is in love with baseball for baseball's sake and loves everything about it. And you have Daryl, who is in love with baseball because of what it can do for his future, right? And that's kind of, this whole big struggle that occurs throughout all of this, right? And then we see this again. It really gets mostly explained by Hutch's father, Carl. Carl was a former minor league baseball player who they also act as like he's constantly ashamed of his dad because his dad was a minor league player. I was like, what? And he made it to AAA by the time he was 24, and then basically stopped playing. And Carl basically explains to him, like, yeah, it was a realization that I was never going to be good enough to compete at the highest level, and so I stopped. But then it's also like this constant running thing of where, like, they kind of shit on the dad for, like, being a AAA player, and it's like, what? He's still, and only ever played shortstop, right? Never switched to another position kind of deal. And so it's like, you're maybe in the top 100 shortstops in the world, and you're getting shit on for this because there's only 32 major league teams. So it's like, what are we doing here? That's my own kind of issue with it. But then, Carl eventually at one point explains why he's working with Daryl during some downtime instead of working with Hutch, even though Hutch has basically wanted all of his life to be accepted and wanted by his father. And as Carl explains it, you know, it's very easy to coach guys that are there because of what it can do for their future, right? Not because they are in love with all the aspects of the game, because when it breaks your heart, it does different things, right? So that's kind of like the main fight that occurs. One of the other things that kind of gets brought up, but is also, I think, you know, something that's always important to be like kind of in the background, is like kind of the marquee positions of it all in baseball and whatnot. Or in youth sports, your best player, no matter who they are, is always playing shortstop, right? That's just kind of how youth baseball works. And really the entire field kind of gets split up into three parts, right? It gets split up into your pitchers, your catchers, and then everyone else, right? And basically, if you're part of that everyone else, you'd be playing shortstop all the time and things. It's the marquee position. It's a position that everyone goes to watch, as Daryl explains at one point. But like, you know, these are both incredibly talented kids, and one of them plays short, one of them doesn't, and one of them gets moved off of it, which is kind of this hard thing, right? When you are, you know, 14 to 15 years old, and you think that this is your future, right? This is everything that you want. This is it, and you get told that you are the second best. And if you are the second best on your own team, well, then you're never going to make it, right? And then, as Carl eventually explains at one point, you know, everyone that he was in the minor leagues with, you know, everyone they interacted with was somebody, right? And this is the thing that I think, you know, often gets forgotten within, you know, the sports world, is that every single guy, whether they are the current stars or whether they are, you know, the 12th man right on the bench in basketball, or, you know, whatever, they were the guy somewhere. And the huge talent pool that exists within sports weeds people out, right? So yeah. The main takeaway from the book itself is the importance of accepting what you have and you know, doing the best with what you have in that situation, which is kind of like one of these things that, like, I think baseball books and baseball stories tend to really kind of focus on, because that is one of the main points in talking about youth baseball and you know, approach to hitting and things. And that's kind of what constantly comes up. Of course, that has now changed within the last couple of years, but you know, for the most part, right, for most of my lifetime and for most of baseball's lifetime, it has been about this kind of lesson of take what you can get and do what you can with what you're given as a hitter. And you know, that kind of becomes the story of Hutch, right? It kind of all comes out in the end of, oh yeah, everything's fine now. The reason that Daryl is so upset about all of this is because Daryl's father has never been in the picture. And so even though Hutch has this incredible dad that was a minor league player and was, you know, close to the big leagues, but never really, you know, shares that with Hutch, he still shows up every once in a while, and is trying to engage the best of his abilities, versus Daryl, who doesn't have anyone, right? So I mean, that's kind of the whole big moral takeaway and whatnot. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of you know, our main character in this, right? I think in a lot of ways the other books that we've read up to this point, I think our main characters have some sort of where there's some sort of redeeming factor in the way of why they're acting this way. of course, they all have dads who were in some way some sort of major or minor league, star. But, in this case, right, you have a 14-year-old in Keith Hutchinson who is really just upset that he's no longer the star in a lot of ways, but it still commands this immense respect from everyone around him and is still viewed as this incredible talent. It just so happens that he's no longer playing shortstop, right? So yeah, within the book, he's not the most endearing, right? Which, not everything has to be the most endearing, most fun. But yeah, super quick read. Yeah, that's the big field by Mike Lupica.